You're listening to The Dental Guys, Episode 7, The Road to the Top. On this week's episode, we bring in Brad, an expert lab technician, to discuss some trends in the dental lab business and what you're really interested in, material selection for everyday single unit restorations. Also, a report from The Dental Guys' recent trip to the ADA meeting, and Brad gives us his top tips for dentists looking to go to the next level in their practices. All this and more on The Dental Guys. Hi, and welcome to The Dental Guys. This is episode 7, and we're pretty excited about this episode. We've been talking about having guests on the show, Wes, and I think we've got a good one today.
This is good. This is going to be good, man. But let me just, before we get into our guest, you just got back from the American Dental Association DC 2015 meeting. And,
yes.
I know that we had some goals for you while you were up there. And one of those goals was to look into cone beams, but we wanted to hear Cliff Ruddle again. Now, I wasn't able to go.
Yep.
You went, on behalf of one of the dental guys, John.
Right.
And tell us a little bit about it. I mean, Cliff Ruddle.
Yeah. Well, for anybody out there listening or watching that's been involved in endodontics, you have to pretty much have run across Cliff Ruddle. I mean, he and Steve Buchanan are probably the two names, and for general dentists and for a lot of endodontists that have, they've just been around forever. They've invented basically every endodontic file system there is that's popular. Not everyone, but a lot of them. And so whenever these guys are around, I try to listen to them. And it had been a few years since I had listened to Ruddle because I guess last time I listened to him was when I updated file systems a few years ago, and so a lot of things have changed since then, and so I was kind of wanted to hear what he had to say.
But we're going to have an episode coming up to discuss this because proper endo technique is one of the hottest things out there in dentistry. I think
Sure.
Root canals are here to stay, and and we need to discuss this in the coming up, but.
Yeah,
you did some interviews, which actually we've released on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't checked those out, subscribe to our YouTube channel and check those out. Some interviews with some cone beam manufacturers. John and I are both in the market for cone beam technology because as we know, we talked about with Jeff Lineberry from a volunteer faculty at Spear, his most indispensable piece of equipment was a cone beam. Yeah,
cone beam.
It was.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it.
And we've been talking about cone beam for a while. Obviously, anybody out there knows what it's about, and that it is, it is a great piece of equipment. The question always was, man, how do you wade through the sea of manufacturers and features and all that? So yeah, I spent some time both from myself, and Wes, just doing our own research, but also kind of for the dental guys, giving some companies an opportunity to tell us a little bit about what they're doing and kind of what's special about their stuff. And people really wanted to let us know what they had to offer. There were a lot of companies to talk to. I talked to 10 and got a couple of those videos up, and then also talked to one company with a sectional matrix system, and we'll get that up. And so yeah, a lot of stuff on cone beam, and kind of that. I think that's. Because we don't want to spend the episode talking about cone beam because we could spend a whole episode on that, but it really gives us a good segue, I think, into our guest for the day, because talk about experts on cone beam, and we're going to bring Brad in here. And Brad, first of all, we're glad to have you here.
Brad.
Yeah, welcome.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Wes.
One thing that I'd like to say a little bit about Brad, and I know he's a humble person, is that Brad has 27 years experience in the lab industry. He's a second generation owner of his current laboratory. And one thing that I liked about Brad is that he has a degree in automotive manufacturing. And in the lab industry. Ooh, did you hear that?
I like that.
Just bring it.
You don't hear that very often these days.
that's one of these things, is that he's always looking at ways to be efficient. Accuracy is of the utmost importance with Brad. I mean, when a guy hires a local university or college to use an Instrom machine to test his own millings, I mean, we've got a guy here that cares. And so, he even went beyond and got medical ISO certification. They give these numbers and stuff, John, 13845. I mean, Brad, what is that? So welcome to the show, Brad. We're so glad. And today we want to say this, is that Brad is going to be a reoccurring guest on our show. We're so glad to have him. So glad to have him here. So welcome, Brad.
Yeah, and I just want to say too, one thing, we're going to keep Brad's lab anonymous. And the reason that we want to do that is really because of Brad, because Brad is a humble guy, and this show will never be about one lab, one product, one company. We're not here to advocate anybody's one thing. We just want to get the best people on the show to talk about topics that we think you guys are interested in. And Brad is that same kind of guy. He's here because he's passionate about what he does, like Wes said. And so, you guys may, listen to Brad and want to get information about him. We can give that to you, kind of offline. But Brad is going to be, here for you guys and for us. And Brad, we appreciate that about you. And Brad, just tell us just a little bit quickly about maybe the size of your lab and how, where. What typically what's your scope of things that you do?
Size wise, employees in total, we're about 80 employees in total. That's office staff, delivery drivers. But in scope, we're a full service dental laboratory. We don't specialize a whole lot in ortho, but mainly crown and bridge and dentures. Do everything in house. Don't do any exporting. No overseas type stuff. Everything's done in house.
Cool. So it's a full scope, and you do everything from crown and bridge, dentures, things like that. Do a lot of implant stuff as well as a lot of milling, which really brings us into kind of our first. Maybe we want to try to separate this into some segments to try to, just from a time standpoint, organize our thoughts. And one of the first maybe topics we have, how has the dental lab industry, maybe yours specifically, and then maybe the industry as a whole, how would you say it's changed in the last maybe 10 years? How has that changed your lab? How has that changed the industry, for better or for worse?
I tell you guys, the first 20 years of my career, it was stagnant. Full cast crowns, PFMs, all technicians were hand trained, Bunsen burners, wax ups, hand layering. In the last 10 years of my career, it's been a fast paced change. I almost consider ourselves a manufacturer now. And not to say there's not boutique laboratories. There's a lot of boutique labs out, but it seems like there's an awful lot more of getting to manufacturing. Like you referred to, John, as we have an in-house engineer, and just to get us more into the CAD/CAM technologies, 5-axis mills. We just picked up a printer from overseas, a massive industrial 3D printing machine. All of that has changed significantly. Not to mention, you brought up cone beam. One of the largest segments of our laboratory is doing implant surgical appliances. So guided surgery to place implants based off of a cone beam, which is almost a separate entity in itself of business. All of that has happened in the last 10 years.
One thing you brought up is that the industry was stagnant 10 years ago. So I graduated dental school back in 2003, and I can remember whenever we started using zirconium crowns. And one of the biggest things about zirconium was learning how to bake ceramics onto the zirconium, because it had a different coefficient of heat. The way that the metal accepts the heat, zirconium, is different than that of whatever base metal you're going to use. So learning those heat times and all that in the ovens was a big deal. But the milling technology, Brad, it's changed. I've been to your lab. I've seen some of these big mills that you used to mill on. And the sad thing is that they're obsolete. And you have mills that are a third the cost. Well, I mean, now some of the mills are not, but I mean, there's still some mills you have that are very expensive, but things have changed to allow you to be able to still have quality control. Why, first of all, first question I have is one, has the quality gotten better from the stagnant years of beginning to mill? And, are we seeing it continually get better exponentially?
Absolutely. I do still believe in a lot of the larger mills, and I'll refer to the early stages of Zirconia. It was really the inception of 3M, and they came out with lava. They kind of.
And you were one of the early milling centers, right?
Yep,
one of the few early ones.
Correct. Yeah, we were one of the first purchasers of this equipment. We actually saw it over in Germany at the IDS meeting. And
what year was that, by the way? Just kind of trying to get like a background for those listening. Like, when
honestly,
would that have been?
I think you're running about 10 or 11 years roughly.
Okay.
And that's a little rough, but anyways, that mass of a unit, and in my background of machining, and the mass of the unit, that physical weight of the unit did play a little bit of a factor on accuracy. Now they have come down in size, but even these smaller units that we have are very significantly heavy. So the mass of them, in other words, vibration is minimized by the weight of the unit. So we tend to always, at least in my laboratory, invest in things that carry some mass. I generally don't do the small tabletops just because I feel like there's too much vibration within the milling. So that's definitely made some changes. Cost, like anything in technology, it starts to come down in cost. So the units have come down. For the smaller boutique laboratories, they're a lot more affordable, which is a good thing. So I think we see that in all scales of economy.
And accuracy has gone up, would you say, or is it that it's just become cheaper to get the same
we're
accuracy?
seeing some more interesting results in these studies showing that even some of the main players, John, like to name a few, just recently, Atlantis has been dinged in some research, and a leader in the milling industry for years, as not as accurate at milling to some of these other connections other than their own Astrotech. And so I'm wondering, Brad, is this accuracy, is it better, or is it just the manufacturer themselves that they don't know how to run these technical machines?
It's simple layman terms is, a 5-axis milling machine is just, it's a brainless machine, literally. What really tells it what to do is the CAM software, and it's, called milling strategies. And the better you are at tweaking the milling strategies, understanding what burrs to use in the machine, RPMs to spin it at, the rate feed, how many times it passes over a spot, how it progressively goes into the alloy, and how much alloy it takes away each time. All of that is milling strategy. It's an art. It really is, and it takes some time to really understand what connection is passable. What we've decided to do, we invested in imaging equipment, so we can look at anybody's connection. We reverse engineered it. You figure out what the connection looks like. You do tolerances, so you buy 50 abutments, and you have a tolerance within the 50 or 100 or whatever your selection is. And every time you mill that connection, we image that same connection, and we look at the dimension of that, and we make sure we're within the tolerance of the actual manufacturer. And that's how we've been able to make sure that we are as good or better than the manufacturer themselves. So there's some things that the laboratories, you can, I don't know, it's not to me to say who does what, but that's just a path we've decided to do to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the doctors.
So what you're saying, it sounds like, is the machines maybe haven't necessarily gotten as much more accurate, but it's just that it's come down in price, more accessible. And you're saying, it sounds like, that it's really the person running the mill that makes the product.
In essence, I think it really comes down to the person running it. Yes, technology's gotten better. The machines are getting a little bit better. The burrs we can buy are getting a little bit better. The CAM softwares are getting better. They are understanding our industry better. So I think in a whole, you can have a good machine and good software and have a bad operator and have a bad product. So you kind of have to have all three. Gotcha.
Now there was a huge turning point along the same lines with milling, but also it was kind of the perfect storm, right, of precious metal prices combined with milling technology. When did you see the shift in your lab from, say, PFM and casting over to where milling became the mainstay? How long ago was that, would you say?
About 8 years ago is where it really hit hard. It was a combination you just said, John, perfect storm. And just what it was. When you start having gold prices go as high as they were, of all-time highs, then you have this new technology and milling machines coming in and zirconia infiltrating in the market. It swept it about 8 years ago. It was the fastest sweep in dental that I've personally seen. It was crazy.
What's the percentage now in your lab, if you know that, of milled restorations, all ceramic, versus metal-based restorations?
100% of the restorations are milled in our laboratory. 80% of them are zirconia.
80% zirconia.
80% are zirconia.
And then what's the lithium disilicate?
Lithium disilicate, it's still a milled product.
Right.
We're not milling that direct yet. We're still milling a wax and then pressing it. Still looking at that. The blue block type mill. It's more of a grinding type system than a milling system. But out of that, I still kind of group that into kind of a separate group of its own.
How much gold do you do?
Very little.
Why?
We're cost.
So cost is pretty much driven gold out of the market?
It's driven gold out of the market. Absolutely.
I mean, is that good, John?
Well, I think that's controversial. I think that gold, I went to an interesting course at the ADA by Christian Stappert, who's been, a huge ceramics researcher. He and, we've seen these people before, Petra Goose that we saw at the Sweden conference.
She knows what she's talking about.
Yeah, these are the people doing ceramics research. And, one of the things he said is, of course, and there's a whole other show, but he said, it's interesting. He said, I love zirconia. It's working. But he said, man, it was such a fast change.
Very fast.
We have, so much data on gold and, it's not really being used. And he said he's a ceramics guy, but he kind of lamented that and said, hey, we believe in it and we think zirconia is where it's at. And he's not doing gold, but it has... it's controversial. There's people that still believe that there's nothing as good as a gold inlay.
Okay, so 10 years ago, going back to our main topic here in this segment, Brad, did you anticipate in 10 years gold would be out of the market?
No, I did not anticipate that.
Why?
It was a standard. It's just standard of care. It was, it was good for mastication. It wore well to the natural dentition. It was easy to handle. Margins could be perfect. Never thought it would have been taken out of the market by zirconia.
The fact is, matter of fact is, hey, Southern West Virginia slang coming in here. The fact is that, I grew up as a dentist in training on type 2 and type 3 gold and being able to burnish margins.
Yeah.
So you can't do that with zirconium.
No burnishing there. That's for sure.
And so is it truly cost is that what drove gold? It's out of the market. Is that why, or? I think aesthetics somewhat play a factor too. There we go.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is definitely the cost, I think, is what rose people's heads. But then when you have the CAD/CAM technology that came in and you can have a better restoration as far as aesthetics go. And, John, you alluded to margins a little bit, or Wes, when you can burnish, you can't burnish zirconia, but you can mill a fantastic margin out of zirconia with these mills. But so I think the combination was great.
Garbage in, garbage out, as you've said many times.
Very true.
Right?
Yeah.
And so
and I want to know that. I want to know, so at the same time, the lab technology
here we go. Bring it, John.
has accelerated, right? Because we talk about cost. And dentistry's experienced, you know where I'm going.
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah. Dentistry has experienced the same change, and it's been in dentistry in some ways a race to the bottom.
Wow.
I think it's very sad.
You said it, man.
There's been a race to the bottom to see who
We're not going to use
any
10 and 15 files now. We're just going to use one file.
Right. We want one file. We want,
one crown, one way, one impression.
We want it fast, and we want it now. And a lot of that is cost driven because people have seen their profit margins hit across the board. And there's a lot more empty chairs, or especially the last 5 years, getting better now, I think, for a lot of people. But what would you say, Brad, has been the change in the quality of impressions
in 10 years
and information that you are receiving in the last 10 years while you've seen such a change in the lab technology. Is that also getting better or worse?
You know, a direct question. I'm going to avoid it just a little bit and start back.
Don't you dare tuck
I'm
your
not going to
tail.
avoid it. I'm coming back to it. I'm coming
Come
back to it.
on.
But you guys got to remember, in my career, I started, my dad did this for 42 years. So, when I started this, we had a ton of doctors that were involved in Pankey Institute, tripod occlusion, Broadwig flag.
Oh, what's that?
How you mount things up on a face bow. All of that is what I was trained in on. And now to answer your question, in the last 10 years, it's really slipped as far as that type of I'd call it product or quality that's given to the laboratory. Face bows, to be honest, a lot of the face bows we can't even use just because and it's not that the doctor's fault. They need to educate themselves on what to do, more or less their staff, because quite often their staff is assisting in that. But the impression techniques, triple trays have taken the market over. 20 years ago, it was more full arch type stuff. Triple trays have definitely taken over, and I totally understand it. It's conceptually, it sounds great. Give me the master cast, you give me the oppose, you give me a bite registration. And if done properly, like anything, it works. But if it's not done properly, it doesn't work.
And it can be it can be a lot. It sounds, that those types of things are, like you say, I think a lot of these techniques can be done right. But I think that what you're saying is it sounds like that they're not being, not as commonly. You're having to do more with less, because metal, at very least, we could say one thing about metal, it is very forgiving.
Absolutely.
And I would say
you
milling,
can burnish your margins.
Milling technology, I think, don't you think it requires a higher quality input to get
because
the same
look at this
output?
today, John, I get a referral from I wish I had the picture, I'd throw it up on the screen, but it was a milled zirconium, solid zirconium crown. And the guy cut feather edge margins. Mm-hmm. And that's a no-no.
Can't do it.
You can't do that with zirconium. And so it was not only that, but it's on the bite wing, dude, it stuck out that far from the actual root of the tooth.
Yeah. So do you think, Brad, that it takes a higher quality impression now to get good product out of the mill than it did with metal ceramic?
Most definitely.
Okay.
It needed a change in the prep design. You're right. Again, when I grew up with it, we had choices. In a way, I trained all technicians. Okay, you got a feather edge, you got a bevel, you got a chamfer, or you got a shoulder. And now we talk about bevels, we don't talk about feather edge. With CAD/CAM, it's just virtually not possible. You got to have somewhat of a taper on your prep. Thanks to adhesives, it's a lot easier to do a taper on your prep, and you have to have a mild chamfer. So so that was a prep design change. And yes, with CAD/CAM, it's got to be a good impression. Garbage in, garbage out. If we have a die in and I got to be able to trim it, and we're going to set that margin right to that, and the mill's going to mill that out of zirconia, which we can't burnish. It is what it is. So I think it definitely does demand a higher quality, but we've seen a retraction backwards, I think, in some of the quality. Matter of fact, I'm talking to some people right now working on a video training of what the doctor needs to send to the laboratory for the laboratory to give you precise product back. And it really is simple as, how do you take a good impression, make sure you take a bite registration. And there's a huge just misnomer out there about a triple tray does not take an accurate bite. You got a patient sitting back in a chair for an hour or two for an appointment. You basically put a triple tray and a bunch of impression material in, and you say bite on your posterior teeth, when the doctor and the assistant only have half the view. So they only see the contralateral side. They can't really even see if the patient's interdigitating in proper occlusion, and they send it to the lab. I'd say, and this is a little bit of a, off the cuff, I'd say about 20% of the impressions that we get, the patient didn't even bite down all the way. So therefore, we have, a misleading impression. Not that that's a bad thing, as long as the laboratory has a bite registration as a backup.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, I kind of feared that you would say what you said, that it takes all the good things, that milling has done for us, but really it takes more skill to prepare with it, because you can't fake it. You can't fake margins. You can't, there's no way to burnish it. There's no way to, And so then you see things like, oh, well, we'll just throw some self-adhesive cement in there, and that'll seal it right up.
We've talked about too. I think we'll transition into this next topic here just in a second. But one more point I'd like to bring up that you've done a lot in your lab, Brad, to basically help dentists to understand what they need to make better dentistry. And has that changed in 10 years? Are you doing more of that?
Oh, no doubt. Look, let's all be in reality. We're all running businesses, and so am I. And there's a million things that can interrupt our day. You got staff, you got patients. It's a tough deal. So it takes effort to train your staff and train the doctors. And yeah, that's a position that we've taken as we see there's a need. And for years, I've went on, in office training. We offer CERP certification for the doctors and the staff. We come in and we train them on how to use a digital camera, train them how to take a shade, train them how to take a good impression, train them how to take a good bite, train them on a massage technique. So try to be an advocate, or, and it's easy for people to say, well, the quality's not as good, but well, then how can you help them? Because obviously they're running a business and it's tough. It's not easy.
You have to help them. We know.
You got to be a partner in it. And I hope every lab out there takes a stance with their doctors. It's really easy to just start griping at them and say, look at the garbage I get. Well, what are you going to do to help them and help educate them and help them get better at it?
Yeah, if you're a lab out there right now, I want you to comment on this video or link us on Facebook or some kind of question for Brad about how you could maybe take your lab to the next level. If you've got questions for him, we can sure get those to him and pass those along. I think this next segment is kind of going to continue on the conversation a little bit here, but we want to talk a little bit about current trends in single unit crown and bridge. Now, we've alluded to that and what's changed in 10 years, but what choices, Brad, do dentists have today? What are the pros and cons of each material? I know that there was a book that you put out this year. It's very beautifully done. One of those things that, I really like. And actually, I put it in my reception area, and it describes the differences in materials. But give us a little idea about single unit. That's bread and butter dentistry. Number 19, number 3, all day long, man. We're crowning these teeth. What kind of choices do we have?
Yeah, if you're talking number 3, specifically, I'd be looking, obviously, PFM's still there. So it's always an option. We all know about that one. It's all zirconia. A full zirconia product is, again, we talk about sweeping the market. Man, I tell you, when full zirconia hit the market, when we realized we could mill basically an all zirconia full cast crown, you want to see an overnight change. In a matter of 2 years, we went from nothing of doing that to 40% of our product line switch over within a 2-year timeline. Wow. So all zirconia, and if you want to enhance that a little bit, if you got a real big smile and the patient showing buccal corridor and you want to enhance it a little bit more, you can do a facial cutback on that, which in essence is a all zirconia occlusion for mastication, but a small cutback in the facial for just to enhance the aesthetics. It's amazing what that can do. Emax is another option too. I'm a little bit careful yet on second molars yet with Emax. Emax has been a great product. It's been around for a long time. I'm a little conservative there because it's still 400 megapascals in strength. And, I tend to say first molars forward just because I'm conservative. Don't want to see them break.
All right. So top to bottom on a number 3 first molar, aesthetics, obviously you're going to put what's your lithium disilicate Emax up there top. Strength-wise, what are you putting up there?
Are they all zirconia?
All zirconia type restoration.
Full zirconia, yep, absolutely.
And then if you want a little enhanced aesthetics, then you add the facial cutback. So, John, in your mouth, what are you putting on your first molars?
On a first molar, I think that
this is this is you.
Yeah. For me, I think that that it's hard to argue with full zirconia with the facial cutback. There's a strong argument.
You got there.
There's a strong argument for Emax though too.
It's on himself now. He's got to take it serious.
Yeah, that's right. I don't take it serious on patients, but for me, it's different. Yeah,
right.
But I think there's a strong argument for Emax though too. On the first molar, I think it's a great restoration. I think that with bonding, especially, that we get very, very good strength. I think we're going to be fine on that. I think really, it comes down to things like is a patient of Bruxer, which I am, and so is that something that plays a
treatment
role?
planning
I think
basically
definitely
is going to drive
Yeah.
that care, basically based on aesthetics and strength.
Yeah, and
so-
giving the lab, I think, too, the ability to do like materials. I think
so
that's something
one
that.
prep or
Well, I mean,
I
I just
see what
mean
you're saying, like-
if you're doing multiples, if they have
Right.
based on existing restorations, I think that's another factor that I would look at on that. And but I think that it's hard to argue with full contour zirconia with facial cutback.
Okay, Brad, let's do second molars. I mean, you talked about first molars, but you did mention some, you were a little scared about Emax back there in the second molar area. Tell me a little bit about what your requirements are for that.
I say that generally because second molars, we generally don't have a whole lot of clearance back there. So, I'm skeptical using Emax way in the back because now we're talking minimum thickness. We got to hold Emax, that 7/8 of a millimeter. I like to see a millimeter back that far. We generally don't have it. So, I'm Enduro. I keep saying a product name. I'm sorry, but we keep pushing the full zirconia in the second molar all day long. All day long, and a little off topic with same topic, but there's a huge change going on right now. I mean, Yttrius stabilized zirconia was kind of the standard of care. And in the last couple of months, cubic zirconia, yeah, you got it, guys, cubic zirconia is now it's a new powder form of zirconia that they've come up with. The advantages are translucency is significantly better. So you're going to see another changeover now in the aesthetics on these things because the translucency is better. And the weakness, though, is that we went from roughly 1,100 megapascals down to about that range of 700 to 800 megapascals, still twice the strength of what Emax is. So personally, I'm not worried about it. I think I'm really excited about it. It's going to really, I think, take another sweep in the zirconia in a good way. So
What are
fake
the
diamond teeth.
What's
betcha.
the
Fake diamonds?
Yeah, fake diamonds. What's some product names of this material for those who are listening? Do you know any names right now or who's marketing it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Zon just launched one. I think they're calling it their anterior zirconia. Jensen has one called Imagine. Put me on the spot a little bit. Those are the two that we've kind of been playing with.
Oh, that's good. Just something for people to look up.
Absolutely. I know there's at least 3 or 4 more on the market right now. I think what happened is once that powder form hit, the manufacturers grabbed it, and they all are getting FDA approval almost at the same time.
How much more translucency are we talking about here? Because that's the biggest complaint. I mean, so much
significant.
So much so that you'd be scared to put this on an endo tooth that was real dark. Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So that's advantage, disadvantage. So advantage is, we got that translucency.
So let's hear a prediction right now. 10 years ago, you said gold would not lose its traction. Are you going to say that Emax will be superseded by translucent zirconium in 10 years?
I think it's going to be a big competition for them. It's a market race right now to whoever can take a millable product at an economical price and can really make it, let's just say, a 1 mil type product. So they can put a block in, they can mill it out, and it has the shade in it. You don't have to internally stain it, no externally staining, and it makes it simple. Scary for the laboratory a little bit. Scary for the lab. Because it puts, how easy are they going to make it and what's that going to do to commodity?
Did you tell Brad you bought that milling machine?
Yeah.
I'll come help you set it up. I will.
Right.
That's good.
So
now here's where, hold on. Let me just say one thing about that. This is why I don't think it will.
Oh.
Okay. This is why I don't think it will, because of bonding. Okay. Because Emax has predictable bonding. And this is why I think Emax, until there's another product, because, of course, we know that the grain structure, that's right, I said grain structure,
serious moment
of zirconia is not etchable. So we're not going to see, I think, a move over into translucent zirconia taking over Emax until we have the ability to bond predictably. And I know there people are going, you can bond a zirconia. Well, the long-term studies are maybe not as good as we would like. About, are you going to do zirconia veneers and trust bonding? I would not. And so that's kind of what I'm interested to see, if we'll get good bonding. I think if we could get translucency and predictable long-term bonding, that would be a combination that might rival Emax. But I think in the posterior, I think if this material really is what you say it is, Brad, this could be maybe a game changer.
So much for facial cutbacks.
So much for facial cutbacks.
That's huge because, man, now there's no chipping.
No chipping, and we're still using some with facial cutbacks. And do you want to see a really neat combination is actually do it with facial cutbacks. You see literally no line between the ceramic and the zirconia.
Really?
So I still think, in the anterior, it's still going to be an option in bicuspid. So, it's really cool.
Let's roll through this. For the dentist right now, the first or second molar needs to be a full contours of some sort. So it would be, zirconium, you're saying, most likely. If they want to go with a gold product, you can still do that.
Absolutely.
And then beyond that, if you want to push the limits of some materials, lithium disilicates might be of choice if you have proper thickness, and bonding is excellent to enamel. On a first molar, you pretty much can choose anything you want at this point.
I agree.
With proper reductions and milling, we can do that. Premolars, where are you at on premolars?
Premolars, I tend to go with full zirconia with facial cutback or Emax.
Okay.
You could even get into lava type product yet where you got a zirconia substructure and lamination of porcelain over top of that.
Is that gone? Is that completely gone now?
Absolutely not. No, we still do a fair share of it. It's gotten better over the years. We were in the inception of this, had a lot of problems with some chipping of ceramic bonded to zirconia. But it's gotten a little bit better through the controlling. You alluded to it earlier, Wes, about how you can manage your porcelain ovens with the heat rates and the cool rates.
Right.
That's helped some of that chipping. So it hasn't gone. It's still there.
And some people like that because chipping is a clue to what's going on in the mouth.
That's right.
And so
because porcelain is strong. Feldspathic porcelain is strong.
And you've got a monolithic restoration against a monolithic restoration. I think the question is, well, is that going to be what's going to break? If you don't have any idea that there's no, when porcelain chips, sometimes you just, get mad and want to throw stuff. But a lot of times it's like, okay, well, maybe this person is, the occlusion's not set up properly, or maybe
your lab messed up.
Yeah, or maybe it's the lab.
We never
Why did my crown break? Well, the lab was struggling that day.
Yeah, I've never heard a dentist ever to blame the lab for anything.
What is up with that, man?
This is the first time.
Admit it. Stuff goes bad.
It goes bad. John, you just said something though that kind of tripped me. The one thing that worries me a lot about the all zirconia type products, especially up in the anterior, where you start putting incisal edges in zirconia and a facial of porcelain, is function. And what are you going to do when you put something so tough up there and you don't develop your occlusion schematic correctly, and you don't take an account of good cuspid rise, posterior discludsion, anterior guidance, and you position that person into the wrong schematic? What's going to give? If it's
That's
so
what
strong,
I'm saying,
what's going to give? And I think you're alluding to that, and it's a little scary that. And we talk back to the education of the dentist. I think you got to really start paying attention to custom incisal guide tables. Where do we function this patient at? Are we going to start doing orthodontics by tooth positioning? If this stuff's so strong and it doesn't break, they're going to reposition their own tooth.
Right. It's a very good thought, and I think that's why. If you get into, say, full arch restorations, there's a lot of discussion about putting, dissimilar materials in, one on the upper, one on the lower, just simply because, you want there to be a weak point, which is a healthy weak point. So something's going to give that, the least worst problem is the thing. You don't want the tooth to break. You don't want, fractures of, an implant body. You don't want flowering of the all these issues that we maybe worry about. I'm interested, too, on this topic, and just maybe switching just a little bit away from that. So we talked about kind of what you'd choose for these single units, but if you're the lab, and I just want to maybe just pull the curtain back a little bit on there's also things that you guys, just like that. Wow. What do you, when it comes down to some of the things I've heard, and I don't know if they're true or not, is that some of these materials are just easier to deal with from a milling perspective, parts breaking, not breaking. I've heard Emax is sometimes difficult to mill because of chipping of edges and things. Does that also play into why you prefer using materials in terms of how it actually works in the laboratory, or is it really just come down to, the aesthetics and functionality?
It all plays a factor, but bottom line is we're still driven by the dentist. And if the dentist requests the product, I feel that we got to do justice and make sure that we find good products, but we got to react to it. And if a doctor gets educated on EMAX and that's what they want, the laboratory has to figure out how to provide a product without having chip margins. So we still have to give you what you want. Do I have preferred products for that? Because I don't like internal remakes either. A remake that happens in the lab and I got to do it twice. I don't like it. It cost us money. So, I'm a little bit more biased to products that are easier to do with less remakes, of course.
Now, what about just as along with that same road you were going down, Wes, what about in the anterior? And we don't have time to really go too much. We just had a big episode on veneers. And I'd like to know, too, with EMAX, with Zirconia, with all these things available now, what do you choose for your single number 8 veneer versus your 6 through 11 set of veneers as far as material choice? What do you talk to dentists about with that, Brad?
EMAX is really a good option because it's got the durability with it. I mean, the old Empress aesthetic has kind of been taken away now, and EMAX is really the ultimate replacement to that, basically because of the enhancements of the type of ingots you can, with the high translucency ingots. I still like feldspathic veneers, but they're extremely technique sensitive to laboratories. You have to kind of specialize in them to do them. But you're really relying on the strength of the veneer to come from the bonding to the tooth. Otherwise, they're quite weak.
Sure.
So to be honest with you, though, most 90% have been an EMAX type veneer. 10%. And
how thin can you get the EMAX veneers?
You down to 3/10.
3/10. Is that's not milled like that though, right? Is that done by hand? How do you do that?
Generally, we'll take it down and we'll get a little bit thicker if it's pressed or milled, and then we'll take it down with some special burrs to thin them out a little bit. And every lab might have a different technique than what I have, but it's what we do.
Gotcha. And again, 3/10. You've had great success with that to the point where you would say, in your hands, you're gonna recommend EMAX veneers kind of across the board.
Absolutely. I'd recommend veneers across the board for one exception, is you have to pay attention to the occlusion. Veneers are not for every patient. Just because a patient walks in, they have diastemas or they want to put a lamination just because of color, it's all about function with veneers. No matter if you put EMAX or feldspathic or what you put on there, you can chip them all if they have a bad functioning habit.
Sure. Well, that's some good stuff there, Wes. I mean, this is day-to-day stuff you can use.
And I guess I'm sitting here, I was listening to this last 2 or 3 minutes of this conversation, and I feel like that dentists out there aren't in a conversation much like this ever with a lab technician. It's mostly just written lab scripts, and it shows up and it says, "Make me a crown."
Yeah, crown number 13.
And is that true? I mean, are dentists just really relying on the lab to choose their product? However, you're saying, Brad, that dentists are driving the lab's choice versus you pushing the product. What's happening?
It's kind of a combination. Really, what you're talking about, the type of dentist that you are.
Okay.
I mean, if you're out at the meetings and you're, really paying attention to products and you're really into that type of stuff, I'll have doctors that generally they're requesting what they want. But you have to be that type of doctors really researching for it. But it's boring. Most dentists don't go to the meeting you did, John, to talk about restorative dental materials. They're looking at other things. So most of the dentists, Wes, are coming in relying on the laboratory.
So you want to choose a lab guy out there, and that's one of the reasons why we have an expert on the show to talk about these things, that understands the pluses and minuses of materials. I mean, if you don't understand the material science of lithium disilicates, zirconia, and what's coming down the pike, because here's a man, Brad, who goes to the International Dental Show every other year in Cologne, Germany, and looks for what's coming. Not what's just here now, but it's what's coming. And we've been talking about translucent zirconiums for years now. And now we're starting to see them infiltrate the market. And he's
because let me just tell you, I mean, I go to the shows,
and you don't see that.
and I
stuff.
didn't know. And Brad is the first person to ever tell me.
I didn't even tell you that, Brad.
About cubic zirconia,
John.
and I go to the shows, man. So
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is like we hear it first on the dental guys. The dental guys.
If you've heard about cubic zirconia, tweet us and give us proof.
Right,
Because
that's what
I
I
don't think
want to
so.
know, because he told me about this the other day, and I was like, "What? Are you serious?" Like, and he's telling me about this intrinsic staining techniques that you do and the layering, how cool it was. I mean, here's a guy that's passionate, and this is the kind of guy that you need to look for in a lab technician. You know, Brad flew down one time whenever I was looking for a lab, and I basically interviewed him. You know, and he had the answers. And that's great, because that's
if your lab guy's not smarter than you,
now
then you need to find a new lab technician, because you need somebody who's smarter than you.
Yeah, going into that, you need somebody that's smarter than you,
that knows materials. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not.
No,
I mean, there's things we know more about than Brad. There's things Brad knows, but that's what we count on. It's just like our specialists. If you're having to tell your specialist how to put an implant in, then you need to find another specialist. And it's the same with the lab. If you're having to tell the lab how to do stuff, then yes, there's sometimes an interplay.
Holy
but
smokes.
your lab had better be the expert in the room when it comes to some of these materials.
Guys, I'm humbled by what you say, but to be honest with you, I never classify myself to be smarter than my dentist.
No.
But I'll tell you,
Here's
that's
the
thing.
problem. That's the problem with dentists, and I'm going to say it right here, is that dentists have a problem with humbleness. And we've talked about this. And what did Brandemark say? He said it. He said, surround yourself with great minds and you're bound to succeed. And that's what we try to do at the dental guys, is to surround ourselves with people that know more than us. And I know, Brad, you know a lot. You've always taught me. I'll tell you what, I've learned so much from just lab technicians in general. And I know you have too, John. We've talked about this over the years, is that impression techniques and how to use hydrocasts and how to do things that, you normally wouldn't do. Guys, find a lab technician out there that you can rely on. They're part of that triad that we've talked about before. A team of people that work. There it is. Nice. Together, we are.
That's exactly how I look at it, guys, is, when I talk to our dentist, I don't want to be a lab guy. And if I'm a lab guy to a dentist, he won't be my dentist for very long.
That's good.
I want to be an extension of his staff. I want to be a partner with him. And I'll tell you guys, there's a ton of lab guys out there that feel that way. And what scares me a little bit about the lab business is, you guys alluded to commoditization and price. And there's a lot of labs out there that are just driving it down, and they're driving her to the bottom.
Yep.
And they're really, really big labs, and it does scare me, because we get a lot of doctors that call us on all these big hybrid implant cases, cosmetic, large, tough cases, but I don't get the A2 molars.
Yeah.
And it hurts, because labs make their money off the A2 molars.
That's exactly right.
They're large cases, just like for you guys, a lot of times large cases aren't as profitable as the small cases. But I guess a pitch in there for the dental labs. If you're right, if a dentist, please go out, find yourself a good lab that you have a relationship with, build it with them, and stick with them through good and through bad. We're humans too. We're going to make some mistakes, and so are you. But work through those and continue to build that relationship. But find a lab guy who's willing to do that. There are labs that are not. It's a commoditization. I want to give you a product, kick it back. I've just never been one of those guys.
Let's keep rolling with this, because this is good. And this is our third topic. Is, Brad, what advice would you offer a new graduate or a young dentist, someone in the last 5 to 10 years? Give us your top 5 things that you would recommend to them, or what advice would you offer?
Now, number one, and it's funny, it's a good prelude to exactly what we just talked about. But my number one is, if you're a fresh grad and you're coming out, before you're too busy and you can't do it, go spend some time in your lab. Not a day. Go spend a couple of days in your laboratory, learning what their processes are, learning what they need from you, and the accuracies of what you need to give them for them to provide a very high quality product.
That's awesome. John, what about
Good
that?
advice.
Have you ever been to a dental lab and actually just spent time in there? I mean, tell me, have you ever done that?
I have before on specific cases,
Right.
but just going in there and watching the process, that's something that I haven't really spent much time doing, and it's a great piece of advice. I I've been involved with that only through, specific case. It's like, well, here, this case is going on. So, maybe we're having a problem with something. So we go, sit down and look at it. But man, that's a great piece because, like you get out of school, you're going to have time. You're going to have an empty afternoon where you're sitting there waiting for the phone to ring. And, that's going to be time well spent because, what I see happening, at least in my dental school situation a lot now, is a lot of the lab duties are not done by dental students anymore.
That's right.
They're being off, sent off to a lab. And so the student learns technique only on PowerPoint slides, or maybe they do one cast crown or something, but it's very hard for the school to be fair, to train the dentist to learn all that goes into, say, a CAD/CAM milled crown. So you come out and maybe you know kind of what it's, what the crown's supposed to do and how it's supposed to fit, but you really don't know the parameters to change if something is wrong unless you've actually been through the process yourself.
So the first thing there you would say is that a dentist coming out, or even a young dentist, even somebody that, well, anybody really.
Anybody almost.
Yeah. Somebody that's, 10 years or less out of practice, even, I mean, dude, every time I go to the dental lab, I'm thinking I learned something. So you're saying you go ahead, invest a couple days with your lab, and you'll learn a lot. So Brad, number two.
Number two, kind of again a segue into what we just said, but master impression taken in digital photography, because those are two of the keys in the crown and bridge of really, again, making that accuracy. You're going to learn that from your lab when you go visit them, but just number two is make sure you understand what a good impression is, how to do good moisture control, how to good tissue retraction. Yes, I said tissue retraction.
Yes.
Not, you got to retract the tissue for the impression to be accurate. And digital photography.
Brian, just back up just a minute, because we just had our tip. Our tip of the week last week in episode 6 or 7? No,
6, I think.
6, yes.
Yeah.
Episode 6, if you want to go back and check that out, John actually describes 2-chord technique.
Mm-hmm. Sweet.
Eureka! Two chords?
Yeah, because that's all I ever use, and you gotta know how to do that, and so you're exactly right when you say tissue retraction again, and I think a lot of this, this is a race to the top, guys, not a race to the bottom.
Yes,
we're not trying to find the fastest way to do things.
Yes,
we're trying to find the best way to do things
because the money will come. It's not speed. Does not 51% healthcare. 49% business. That's the balance. Now, Brad, you said one other word in there. You said master impressioning and master photography.
Hey, put your dental lab technician in your shoes. A master cast, stone cast, it only tells me part of the story. But if you can put me in an environment of where you're at, show me the patient, show me the lips, show me the skin tone, show me the contours. It just really helps us as a lab technician to give you a better product. It's just a great communication tool.
Yeah. That's good.
So
that's good. All right. What else you got?
Yeah. Number three.
Number three. Take the time to train your staff in proper techniques, because sometimes you're only as good as what your staff is, and if you don't take that time with them, most of the time when I go in office, I love it when the doctor's not in there, to be honest with you, because they learn better when I'm in there, and they ask questions. They don't want to be embarrassed in front of their doctor sometimes, but you got to train that staff.
That's good.
Man, a dental team is so important.
Even maybe having the lab help to train the staff.
Absolutely. We do it all the time. We had 2 weeks ago, I had one of our local dentists come over. He brought 2 of his assistants, and 4 hours we went over different. It was impressioning, it was photography, it was shade taking, and I got a thank you letter, and again, very humble, and a thank you letter, and in it said, Brad, thank you so much for taking your time. We learned more from you than we do from most of the seminars that we take, that we have to travel and go to.
That is awesome.
I was very, very humbled by that and honored, because
that is so cool.
Again, that's a partnership that your lab can offer you.
Sure.
So I mean, would it help that does it help sometimes that the team coming to the dental lab actually would benefit just as much as the doctor there?
I think just as much. Absolutely.
Like, what about, even pouring up models? I mean, I know sometimes not everybody is a digital impressioning machine. So, pouring up models, you get opposings a lot, right?
We get opposings a lot. We get a lot of distorted opposings. Number one is, impression technique of Elgin. It's a little bit different than a polyvinyl or polyether. And yeah, most dentists, as you guys know, don't have whip mix machines. So you guys are hand spatulating and not pulling the bubbles out. So it's a little trickier to pour it.
You don't hand spatulate?
Well, we can hand spatulate to do initial mix.
Sure, tell me a little bit about your room there. You've got this is like humidity controlled too, right?
That's for investing a humidity controlled room.
Yeah, it's cool, man. It's unreal.
Nice. Look at him. He averts his eyes from the camera because he's almost embarrassed to say it. But it is a beautiful thing.
It is.
That is a beautiful thing.
Dude, that's a dental geek right there.
Embrace this. This is the good thing. So all right, what's number 4, Brad?
Invest in technology. I think technology, even though you're coming out, especially as a fresh grad, you're in debt in school. I feel bad. You guys had an episode I listened to. It was fantastic about the debt that's incurred, but you guys got to jump into technology because it will pay for itself in time. You guys are talked about CT scanning. I think everybody looks at it as, oh my gosh, that's a huge investment, but it's one that will pay for itself. You can expand your education. You can start placing implants. It's a revenue generator. Digital capturing units, the True Defs, the Ateros of the world, I think over time start to pay for themselves in accuracy and quality of product. Invest in technology.
That's good. Speaks for itself. All right, what's number 5?
Expand your education and never stop learning. I see a lot of dentists, again, I think because they're a little bit impaired by the checkbook and they're in debt, it's hard to invest in the Spears and the Coises and great education, but it costs money. But I think it's money well spent because it's going to make you a better dentist and do a better product for your patients.
What's some of the best courses that you've been to over the years?
Oh, man, I tell you. Dawson was fantastic. Pankey's been a good institute. Coyce has been fantastic. I have not experienced Spears. Thanks to these gentlemen, I'm going to be experiencing that this June with the occlusal course. But that's kind of where I've been. So
awesome.
Yeah, and we talked about that. Even kind of the first couple episodes we had that. As we were getting geared up to go to Spear. I think that. We see it so much that people get out of school, as we talked about in the second episode, and it's this hard decision. What do I spend my money on? And I get it if you're having to spend your money on paying your practice loan payment. I totally understand. You have to have a place to live and you have to have a car to drive. But if you want to talk about things that will make you money, I know Wes and I both firmly believe that the things that make you the most money are the things you invest in as far as education. And like Wes said earlier, it's not about speed. That's not what's going to make you money in the long run. It's about trying to get the very best knowledge you can. And if you get to that point and you partner with a lab that understands that as well, and they are going to bring you up to a higher level, that's where you can, if you choose to, you can get to that level where the financially rewarding part comes, I think, if the quality is there and because you have confidence. That's really what it's about. It's just confidence to treat these cases, confidence to talk to patients, confidence to talk to your lab, instead of, putting on there for your partial design, cast partial, and that's all you put on there, and the lab chooses everything, and the lab does everything, and you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. So I think that education is huge.
Confidence, if you're confident about something, you have to embrace failure. And failure is where we learn the most, because we can look back at something just like we were talking about earlier. It's like when that porcelain chips, don't look to the first person to blame. Don't just wait. Back up, cool your jets a little bit, because be confident that, hey, maybe we did choose the right product here and we don't know the whole story yet. And that confidence turns into, yeah, we failed, but let's figure out why we failed. And when you explain that to patients, they don't get mad. They're like, you know what? Something went wrong here and we don't know exactly what went wrong, but we're going to fix it. And we're going to figure out how to fix it. It could be the material. It could be me. Yeah, it could be the dentist's fault. It could be anything. We don't know. There's so many variables in the human body, and we're asking something, a prosthetic that a lab makes in another country, another state, 500 miles away, right down the street, away from the patient. something that is a false material, now we're going to ask it to be like biology and meet biology. And I think it's very interesting because no matter what we do, what material we have, there's nothing as good as our natural teeth. And so we as dentists try to strive to keep these teeth. And labs try to, over the years, to improve. And that's where we're at today because of people like Brad, who's invested in technology to make our teeth, as best they can be with prosthetics. They are prosthetics and they will fail. They have a life just like anything else does, just like a gallon of milk. It's going to expire sometime. It's just a matter of when. And I appreciate people that invest in technology and invest in education to teach dentists, and that's who Brad is. And we really appreciate Brad coming on the show tonight. We like to banter a little bit. And, I just want to say this. From here on out, Brad, we crown thee a dental guy.
Official dental guy.
Official dental guy. Right here it is.
Maybe I should be the dental lab guy.
Well, there we go. The dental lab guy. That's it.
That's
it. All right.
Yeah, we hope to get Brad back, from time to time to, talk about.
We got him hooked up with a good microphone there, so that's saying something.
Yeah, man.
Guys.
He's got some gear now.
I'm always here to help, and always here to help educate the dentist. So anytime. Thank you.
That's good. Fantastic. Well, listen, it's been a great show. We've talked about change. We've talked about what to do, what kind of crowns to use. But you know what? It really starts to happen is whenever you ask questions. And that's what I want you to do right now is go and like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, and those numbers are growing. Send us a message. We've got a really fast response rate at responding to messages. We've had people responding already. So find us on Facebook, The Dental Guys, of course, on Twitter, and then on YouTube. It's a great place to go for video of this podcast. Also, iTunes, and you Android users out there, there's many podcasts that you can tune into. We ask you to choose The Dental Guys as your place to go for topics, discussion, and learning about dentistry and just good guests like Brad. So for John and Wes and Brad, the Dental Lab guy, we are The Dental Guys.
So hit stop.